Dale Evans lived a life that seemed to shine with faith, music, and romance. She stood proudly beside Roy Rogers, the cowboy legend adored by millions. Yet behind the Western glamour was a story scarred by secrets, heartbreak, and the weight of truths she carried for decades. In her final years, when the pain could no longer be silenced, she revealed the reality of her marriage and the haunting regrets that never left her. A childhood of struggles and early heartbreak. Before she became the Queen of the West, Dale Evans was simply Frances Octavia Smith, born October 31, 1912, in Uvalde, Texas. Her childhood was far from the Hollywood image later crafted for her. Raised partly by her uncle, Dr. L.D. Massey, in Arkansas, she grew up in an unstable environment that forced her to mature quickly. At just 14, she eloped with Thomas F. Fox. By 15, she was a mother to Thomas Jr., nicknamed Tommy. But the young marriage collapsed within a year, leaving Frances a divorced teenage mother, abandoned in Memphis and struggling to survive. To support herself and her child, she turned to music. In the late 1920s, she found work singing and playing piano at local radio stations, WMC and WREC. Though talented, she faced constant rejection, financial uncertainty, and the stigma of being a single mother at a time when Hollywood demanded spotless reputations. By 1929, her first divorce was finalized. Determined to reinvent herself, she remarried in 1929 to August Wayne Johns, though that union ended in 1935. The turning point came in the 1930s, when a Louisville radio station manager suggested a new name. Frances Octavia Smith was reborn as Dale Evans. The crisp, catchy name gave her career momentum, and her silky voice soon earned her a contract at 20th Century Fox. Yet along with the contract came pressure to erase her past. Studio executives forced her to claim that her son Tommy was actually her younger brother. For years, she lived with the lie, playing the role of a wholesome rising star while privately grieving the deception. It was one of many secrets Dale would carry, a weight she would later confess had haunted her entire life. Hollywood dreams, broken marriages, and a fateful encounter. By the mid-1930s, Dale Evans had begun to carve out a place for herself in show business. After divorcing August Wayne Johns in 1935, she married again in 1937 to pianist and arranger Robert Dale Butts. The marriage, like the two before it, was filled with strain. They collaborated musically, but the relationship lacked real intimacy. By 1946, that marriage too had ended in divorce, marking yet another painful chapter in her quest for stability. Yet Dale's career continued to grow. At 20th Century Fox, she was cast as a featured singer and began appearing in films. Her voice, smooth yet commanding, made her a natural fit for jazz, swing, and big band music. She became a regular performer on the popular Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy radio show, which brought her to national attention. As Hollywood began molding her public image, she was dressed in elaborate cowgirl costumes, embroidered gauntlets, rhinestone boots, and fringe jackets, transforming her into a glamorous Western star. In 1944, her career took an unexpected turn when she was cast alongside Roy Rogers in The Cowboy and The Señorita. The chemistry between the two was immediate, both on and off screen. At the time, both were still married, Roy to his second wife, Arlene, and Dale to Butts. But fate would soon intervene. Roy lost Arlene tragically in 1946, shortly after she gave birth to their son, Roy Jr. Dusty. The widowed cowboy star was suddenly alone with 3 children to raise. Dale, who understood heartbreak all too well, became a friend and companion during his grief. Their bond deepened, and by the end of 1947, Roy proposed to Dale in a way only he could, sitting on his horse trigger moments before riding into a rodeo arena in Chicago. On December 31, 1947, they married at the Flying L Ranch in Oklahoma, where they were filming Home in Oklahoma. It was Dale's fourth marriage and Roy's third. But unlike their previous unions, this one would last. Together they became Hollywood's King of the Cowboys and Queen of the West, a partnership that promised love, success, and a new beginning, though hidden struggles would never be far behind. Love, loss, and the book that changed everything. Not long after their wedding, Dale Evans embraced not only Roy Rogers but also his three children from his marriage to Arlene, Cheryl, Linda Lou, and Roy Jr., better known as Dusty. Roy, in turn, welcomed Dale's son, Tommy, no longer forced to live under the false identity of being her brother. For the first time, Dale could acknowledge him as her child without fear of Hollywood backlash. Their blended family became a central part of their lives, a mix of biological children, adopted children, and eventually foster children. In 1950, Dale and Roy experienced both joy and heartbreak. Dale gave birth to their first and only biological child together, Robin Elizabeth. The baby was born with Down syndrome and serious health complications. At a time when developmental disabilities were rarely spoken about publicly, Dale and Roy faced whispers, judgment, and pressure to hide their daughter. But instead of turning away, they embraced Robin with love and care. Tragically, Robin died just before her second birthday in 1952 from complications tied to her condition. The loss devastated Dale. For a time, she struggled with grief so deep that even her faith felt shaken. But she eventually found a way to turn that grief into purpose. In 1953, she published Angel Unaware, a heartfelt book that told Robin's story in the form of a message from heaven. The book shocked Hollywood but touched countless parents across the country who had faced similar struggles. Dale used her platform to demand more compassion and understanding for children with disabilities, long before it was common to do so. Her words resonated deeply. She later recalled how writing the book was both a confession and a release, saying she believed Robin's short life was meant to open people's hearts. The impact was immediate. Families wrote to her, sharing their own stories of loss and renewal. Over time, organizations and charities began shifting attitudes about children with special needs. In Oklahoma, the County Council for Mentally Challenged Children renamed their center in Dale's honor, a lasting tribute to Robin's memory. This moment cemented Dale as more than a performer. She became a voice for parents in pain, using her personal tragedy to advocate for compassion. Yet behind the public strength, she still carried private sorrow, one of many burdens that would shape her later confessions. Fame, family, and a devastating blow. The 1950s brought Roy Rogers and Dale Evans to the height of their fame. Together, they starred in a string of successful Western films, including Don't Fence Me In and Under California Stars. From 1951 to 1957, they became household names with The Roy Rogers Show, where Roy rode his famous horse Trigger and Dale appeared on her buckskin mare, Buttermilk. Week after week, they entertained families across America, solving mysteries, promoting wholesome values, and often closing with a message of faith and optimism. Their musical career flourished alongside their screen success. Songs like Happy Trails became beloved anthems, embodying their on-screen image as a couple who always overcame adversity. Dale's songwriting and voice gave their music a unique warmth, while Roy's cowboy charisma cemented their brand as the ultimate Western sweethearts. At the same time, they were raising a family that grew even larger. In addition to Roy's children from his first marriage and Dale's son Tommy, the couple adopted 4 children: Mimi, a foster daughter from Scotland; Dodie, a Native American girl; Sandy, and Debbie. Their household was bustling, filled with children from different backgrounds, united under one roof of love, structure, and faith. But tragedy struck again in 1964. 12-year-old Debbie, their adopted daughter, was killed in a horrific church bus accident. The loss was sudden, cruel, and nearly unbearable. Dale later admitted that it was one of the darkest moments of her life. She described the helpless guilt that consumed her, wondering if she could have prevented the tragedy. For Roy and Dale, the pain of burying another child reopened old wounds from Robin's death. The grief weighed heavily on the family. Trying to escape the shadows of the accident, Roy and Dale decided to leave their large Chatsworth ranch, where too many painful memories lingered, and relocate to Apple Valley, California, to the Double R Bar Ranch. Though the move provided a fresh setting, the sorrow of Debbie's loss never fully left Dale. From that point forward, her speeches, interviews, and books carried a sharper edge of honesty about suffering and faith. The woman once presented as Hollywood's cheerful cowgirl now spoke candidly about grief, using her pain to comfort others while quietly wrestling with her own faith, activism, and confessions of a strained marriage. By the 1960s, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were not only Hollywood figures, but also outspoken voices for their faith. Dale, in particular, became a bold advocate for Christianity in public life. In 1964, she addressed thousands at a rally in Los Angeles, calling for the return of mandatory school prayer, declaring that America's children needed guidance from the Lord. She aligned herself with conservative causes, even campaigning for presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. Her convictions were woven into her career, from the songs she recorded to the speeches she gave, painting her as a moral compass for many who admired her courage. Yet behind the scenes, life with Roy was not as flawless as their on-screen partnership suggested. In her later years, Dale began to speak candidly about the pressures inside their marriage. Roy, known to fans as the gentle king of the cowboys, was in private a strict disciplinarian, especially with his children. Dale often felt isolated when Roy was away filming or touring. She confessed that there were stretches of loneliness and emotional strain that no amount of applause could erase. Her greatest regret, however, was the deception forced upon her in the early years of her career. For more than a decade, she had publicly claimed that her son Tommy was her younger brother, a lie manufactured by the studio to preserve her wholesome image. Even after she revealed the truth following her marriage to Roy, Dale admitted that the years of hiding her motherhood haunted her. It was a burden she carried quietly, one that ate away at her sense of authenticity. Still, Dale turned her pain into purpose. She wrote more than a dozen books, many offering hope to grieving parents or encouraging readers to rely on faith during hardship. In interviews, she insisted that she would rather be remembered not for her rhinestone cowgirl outfits, but for her ability to speak truthfully about suffering. By exposing the fractures in her life, she believed she could help others heal their own. Even as she grew more candid, Dale never stopped honoring Roy in public. She acknowledged the challenges but also emphasized the love and respect that kept them together for over 50 years. It was a complicated truth, a marriage built on devotion, shadowed by loss, and made human by flaws. The final years and a painful goodbye. As the 1970s and 1980s unfolded, television was changing, but Roy Rogers and Dale Evans remained beloved cultural icons. They often appeared together on nostalgia programs, introducing their old films and sharing memories of Hollywood's golden days. In the 1990s, Dale even hosted her own religious television program, continuing to weave faith into her public work. But while their legacy endured, their personal lives grew increasingly marked by loss and frailty. Roy's health began to fail in the 1990s. Dale, ever the steady partner, stayed by his side until his death on July 6, 1998. His passing ended a partnership that had lasted more than 50 years. For Dale, the loss was both public and deeply personal. She was no longer part of the legendary duo that had shaped her identity. She was now a widow, left to face her final years without the man who had defined so much of her life. In those last years, Dale's body grew weaker. She suffered from physical ailments, but the emotional weight she carried was heavier still. With Roy gone, she became more reflective and more open about the truths she had long kept hidden. She spoke of the loneliness she had felt in her marriage during Roy's long absences, the strain of his strict parenting, and the lingering regret over presenting her son Tommy as her brother. These confessions shocked many who had seen their marriage as a fairy tale, but Dale insisted on honesty. "Mom wasn't afraid to reveal the truth," her daughter Dodie later said. "She believed in sharing the good and the bad, because that's what makes a person whole." Dale Evans died on February 7, 2001, at the age of 88, just 3 years after Roy. Her last days were described by her children as peaceful, with Dale expressing her readiness to reunite with her husband and the children she had lost. Her passing closed the final chapter on one of Hollywood's most enduring partnerships, but it also left behind a story more complex than the image projected on screen. A tale of glamour and faith, yes, but also of sorrow, secrets, and resilience. Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were remembered as the king and queen of the West, but behind the legend were wounds that never fully healed. Dale's final confessions showed the world that even icons carry burdens too heavy to hide. What do you think? Should stars like Dale have shared these truths sooner, or was it right to wait until the end? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of the legends you thought you knew.